Like and subscribe, hate and comment. Today is election day in America. I know you probably don't notice because there's no presidency on the ballot. In most areas, you might not even have an election at all. But it is election day. Every year is an election year. And there are 7 races that you want to look at tonight to figure out what will happen in 2022 and part of it for the Biden agenda. So, again, like and subscribe, hate and comment. Now, the first races you're going to want to look at are the ones that the progressives will definitely be looking over to see just how strong their beliefs are in 2022. The first one is the special election in Minnesota about whether to dump the police in Minneapolis and replace it with a government agency of public safety. If that passes, that's definitely going to fuel that the defund the police was not a bad initiative, at least to progressive voters. I don't think that that's going to pass, but it is going to depend on the margins as to how emboldened progressives feel. If it's barely defeated, their message when it comes to Democratic primaries may be, hey, we've got something here. And they may look for candidates who have that as a belief, but maybe just not the strongest belief they want to lead on. The second race they're going to want to look at is the mayor of New York. Now, the mayor of New York is going to be a Democrat. That is not. That's just going to happen. But it's going to be the margin of victory that's going to count. And the bigger the margin of victory, the more emboldened they will feel. The third race that they want to feel is something that they definitely don't know if they're going to win, which is the Florida 20 special primary. Now, the general election is actually in January, but there is absolutely positively no chance that the Republican nominee, whomever it is today, is going to win in January. There are 11 candidates on the ballot, but there are 3 that the press here in Miami and South Florida has really looked at. One is the running as a very liberal Sheila Surfifilis McCormick. She's never held office. She has ran against the late, and I will never say great, former impeached judge turned congressman. That's right. Just because you've been impeached of your job doesn't mean you can't successfully run for Congress and, eventually create a slush fund to pay for your sexual harassment claims. Don't worry, he wasn't impeached for sexual harassment. He was impeached for bribery. Of course, I am speaking about the not so late, not so great. Well, definitely late, but not so great. Alcee Hastings. She has raised the most money because she's given her campaign almost $4 million, and she's definitely waging an air war. Now, the 2 other candidates who have the best shot to defeat her are both Broward County representatives in their commissioners. It is Holness and Sharif. And they've had a few television ads, and they've both have tried to play up on a progressive light angle. Wholeness more than Sharif. I and what you're going to see is if the very progressive McCormick wins, that's going to get the squad crowd very happy, right? That's going to be a sign that yes, African Americans, and this is mostly an African American district, really want to see more of the progressive angle. And you may see in 2022 when you have a few open seats that are going to be in black majority districts to run that very extreme progressive candidate. If you see one of the other 2, it's going to be a sign that maybe that's not the best strategy. And by the way, the winner of this race is probably not going to have more than 25% of this vote. Now, if one of those 3 do not win, this will be very key for the regionalism of this district. Now, this district kind of has a giant open space, does a straight V line into Broward, does a straight V line into Palm Beach. The 3 other candidates that have elected office are all state reps. Well, 2 state reps and a state senator. There's also a former Palm Beach County commissioner. If any of them can get a foothold in their own backyard, you could see the winner of this primary maybe hitting 20% of the vote. And people will probably read too much into it, especially in January when the Democrat will win 65% of the vote in a special election voted on by like all seven Republicans and 150,000 other Democrats. Now, those are the elections the progressives really care about. The election that Biden really cares about is the Virginia governor's race. My money is on the Republican taking the seat. Now, yes, generally the party out of power wins the governor's race. Out of power as the presidency wins the governor's race. But Democrats have held the governorship for about a decade. So it's hard to say that this will be anything but a real referendum on Biden in Virginia. And that state has been trending blue. For the last 2 years, they have had what's called the trifecta. They've had the state Senate, the state House, and the governor's mansion. I think Youngkin is going to hit 50%. I think it's going to be 50 to 47, 3% with the other candidates. And Terry McAuliffe, who in Virginia you can only be governor for one term without taking a break. I don't think he wins a central reelection. I also think that there are no state Senate seats, so the Democrats definitely retain the state Senate. But the Republicans would need 5 to split the House and 6 to take a majority in the House. I'm not sure if that's likely, but if you're talking about a Republican governor and say 48 Republicans instead of 45 out of 100, that's a really good night for Republicans. There are 2 other cabinet member races, the lieutenant governor, and in lieutenant governor, that's the one that's least likely to flip Republican. It is between now the Republicans do have a we'll see if race does play into a factor. Winsmore Sears is an African American female Republican running, trying to become the first African American lieutenant governor in the state of Virginia, and only the second African American female lieutenant governor in the South's history. I don't see her winning the race. If she wins, that is a absolutely horrible night for the Democrats. She's been polling the farthest away. She's running against Hala Ayala. I'm going to butcher names. I don't think the Democrats will lose that seat. The seat that they may lose in the cabinet is the attorney general race. Now, during a few years ago, there was a whole thing about major racism, and that that attorney general is still there. One who admitted to wearing blackface, unlike the governor at the time who did and then didn't, and then sort of didn't forget about it. That race has been the most 50-50. It's very likely that if you see one of these contests that go into recount, it is going to be the attorney general race. I do think the Republicans pick up that seat. Now, in some races that we know the outcome, but it's really about the spread and what matters, we look to Jersey. Now, in Jersey, you have the current governor, Phil Murphy, is expected to win by a pretty fair margin. Monmouth poll has him up by 11. He's going to win the race, but it's a matter of what is that spread. So if that spread is closer to 5, that's a good sign for Republicans in the North. This is a redistricting year, and Democrats are controlling a number of these state legislatures, and they will. So there's going to be if any place in the Northeast that loses a seat is probably going to lose a Republican U.S. congressman. Or congresswoman. That's just how the math's going to work. But if the numbers are good when it comes to the 2022, in the other races, when it comes to governor, statewide office, if this race is close, a lot of people are going to say, what did Jack Citrielli do right to close that gap as the Republican challenger? What did he do wrong? And they'll play off of that. Down in my neck of the woods, down in Miami, you're going to see the re-election of our fine mayor. Again, it's about the spread. If he's closer to 55%, then people are going to say, well, could the Democrats, if they can find strong candidates in a redistricting year, pick up some of these congressional seats. Florida is, of course, going to redistrict. It adds a seat. We haven't set our boundaries yet, but one of them is probably going to be of the two Republican to switch Democrat to switch Republican seats. One of them is probably going to be more Republican than the other because the Democrats put in a strong Democratic challenger, probably in the area that's going to include most of Miami, the old Ileana Ross-Lehtinen seat. Is that new district, or the Democrats are going to put in a Democrat who won, is Hispanic, speaks Spanish, unlike the former uh, elected officer in that seat, Donna Shalala, and can they use, if it is a weak reelection, can they use that against the Republicans? If it is a strong reelection, you're talking 60 to 65, 70% for the mayor of Miami. And yes, technically these races are nonpartisan in Miami. That's not a good sign for Democrats. Now, the one race that nobody is talking about, but definitely should, is a ballot initiative in New York. Now, New York had not had the trifecta: governor, assembly, and Senate in the Democratic control for 90 years. They have control of all of them. However, they gave up the right to control redistricting in what is, I would consider, political malfeasance, because at the time, the Republicans controlled the state Senate. Democrats have put this ballot initiative on the ballot to take it back. So instead of Republicans probably losing one of their congressional seats and probably making one seat more purple, you are talking about the Democrats trying to get all but maybe two, and those two seats will be very super red. Elsa Stefanik, who is the number three in the Republican, number three in the Republican caucus right now in the House, is definitely looking at this race because if it passes, you could be talking about the number three in the House being gone because they will take her district and crush it. They'll literally take blue strips and go all the way up into the middle of nowhere and take her Sarasota North District, which I grew up in what is now New York 21. I grew up in that area. It is a red area. There's a few blue areas like Messina or Plattsburgh, but it's mostly a red area, and they will carve it. There'll be a Syracuse up. There'll be an Albany up. There will be a Utica Rome, and find everything that's blue and put it up. And they'll gerrymander the rest of the red, and they'll kill all of it. Probably will be forced to keep the Staten Island red, which will be a swing district, and they'll probably keep one of the areas in the southwest, that western tier, red, and everything else they're going to make purple or purple blue. So this is a very important election, and if it gets 51% of the vote, Democrats will have a field day, because instead of maybe gaining a seat in a year when the state of New York loses one seat and probably gaining one blue seat, they could be talking about picking up 5 in New York and making it that much harder for Republicans to win Congress nationwide. So like and subscribe, hate and comment. If there's any race that you think that I should have included, let me know, and we'll see what happens.